Collaborative endeavors in educational opportunities are necessary for us who are of Christian faith and what it means for us to share and experience and what it means to learn with those who suffer with a disability. Today, our guests will talk about a disability summit that they have participated in and helped to create in order to nurture such opportunities for us as people of faith. Please stay tuned. Welcome to the show. I'm Karen Crozier of Perspectives on Faith and Culture, and today I'm joined by Julie Lane, who is professor at Fresno Pacific University in special ed, Quinn Kennison, who is associate professor in Christian ministry and leadership, and Lisa Keith, who is assistant professor in special ed. Welcome to the show, the three of you. I have heard through the grapevine that you three have been integral part in giving shape to the Johnny and Friends of Central California's Disability Summit. Please share with our listening audience, what is the Disability Summit?
Well, Disability Summit really is a group of people coming together who are passionate about an idea, passionate about a concept. And as Quentin and I have worked with the Johnny and Friends organization in shaping this Disability Summit, it's really providing an avenue for educators, helping professionals, ministers, Christian school teachers, public school teachers, to come together and talk about why God brings individuals into the world who are affected by disability. How do they fit into His kingdom, and how do they make His kingdom whole? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's a good assessment. In many ways, our goal is to both utilize the resources of Johnny and Friends, who's been engaged in this work around the church life, particularly evangelical churches, and then the life of Fresno Pacific University to come together for the purpose of helping train and educate, again, people in the teaching, education profession, pastoral leaders, helping professionals such as social workers, psychologists, therapists, and then also we're reaching out to families, another element of that. And so we're trying to utilize the resources of both of these institutions for the purpose of helping to, again, provide opportunities for education, understanding, and growth around both a theological but as well as practical application.
Lisa, I'm going to sort of frame it a little bit different for you. Do you think a summit will be intimidating for the common person who's hearing about the event?
Hopefully they'll think of the word summit and think of the top of the mountain, a place where we can all gather, a place where everyone is welcome, and rather than an educational seminar that might be more somber and more intimidating.
The top of the mountain. Do we all have access to the top of the mountain?
That's what we need to talk about.
I like that metaphor. Yeah, so each one of you have had a particular role in helping to shape this summit. So beginning with you, Lisa, what will be your contribution, and what have, on the day of the summit, and what have you done to help create it?
I've been invited by Quentin and Julie to present, and I'll be presenting on two topics. One, to be talking to educators and those in the church community about how can we restore relationships in today's classrooms. How can we help those children who may have difficulty with impulse control, for example, or emotional difficulties, become part of the community at large? And then I'll be talking to educators about professional ethics, Christian beliefs, and their disposition towards children and their colleagues in the classroom.
Can you share more about how you envision Christian ethics? What type of framework are you using to help those educators to think about their role in relationship to their students?
So I've looked at the Fresno Pacific idea, the Council on Exceptional Children's Code of Ethics, and the National Educators Association Code of Ethics. And I've aligned those three professional organizations in such a way that you can be free to share your faith in such a way that it still aligns with an ethical consideration in the classroom.
Great, so they will be able to integrate faith in the midst of the non-faith standards that they must adhere to. Great. Quentin, what is your role and contribution?
Back about 6 years ago, I was approached by Dean Kent Eaton, who was at the university, and Kent had been in conversations with a gentleman that's connected to the Johnny and Friends organization, David Hooker. And we were talking about ways in which the two institutions could partner together, and so I had an opportunity at that time to enter into a conversation and begin planning our first gathering. It had a different name at the time, but about 4 years ago or so, we met together and had this first meeting. And we invited people from the church, invited students from the university, invited people from the society at large, teachers and others, to participate. And then over time we began to talk again with the new executive director at Johnny and Friends, Laura McGrew, and said we would like to enter into this partnership again. How can we continue this process? And so I've been able to help participate in that form of function. But one of the things that was pretty obvious in that first outing was that it was really limited in terms of who was involved in the planning of it. And so as we began to talk, Laura, Jan Joaquin at the Johnny and Friends office, and myself, we said, we need to draw in some other partners in this. And of course, with our special education program and the resources, like Lisa and Julie, that we have at the institution, we felt like, okay, we need to draw other partners into this. And so I've been able to serve kind of as a liaison with the university to our resources with Johnny and Friends and help create some partnerships there. I have the privilege of being able to present on a way of thinking about how God might give us some insight into a theology or theologies around disability. So I'll be able to present that at the summit as well.
Great. Julie, I heard that this was your baby. Is that true?
I don't know about my baby, but
something you've given birth to.
I have been involved with Johnny and Friends for several years now. Actually was introduced to the organization through my doctoral work when I was at Pepperdine University, and brought in my background of working within Christian schools and developing special ed programs within Christian schools over the last 20 years. So I bring in a different piece rather than through the church ministry, really through the eyes of the Christian school and the Christian educator and administrator and board of how do we work with children with special needs within a Christian environment. And so it's my baby from the standpoint, I love to build programs in Christian schools and help schools facilitate not only the policy procedure process, but also in creating a different culture and dynamic within the school to understand the purpose of these children in our schools and that they are part of our ministry. So my angle is a bit different than Quentin's, but was delighted when he asked me to come alongside and work very closely with him, with Laura McGrew and Jan Joaquin at Johnny and Friends to develop this Disability Summit. And the other piece I guess I bring to it is that I have spoken at some of the other disability summits, which is a coined term of Johnny and Friends in different regions here in California as well.
Well, share more about that, as they have a very broad outreach, international work that they do with the concept of a disability summit in the Central Valley. What do you consider will be some of the challenges of getting this broad range of array of people to come? Quentin, let's begin with you. What do you think will be some of the challenges in getting people to show up?
I think one of the challenges right off the bat is, again, the recognition of the need. Johnny and Friends likes to promote the reality that the people affected by disability are one of the most unreached people groups in the world. That around the world they tend to be shunned by all kinds of people, populations and otherwise. And so as a result of that, one of the starting points is the recognition of the church's need, as well as people of faith, that this is a serious need in our context as well as in the context of other places. So starting with just the awareness, the fact that congregations oftentimes aren't always aware of the fact that there are people who would come to their church if they just knew that they were welcome, or if there was space created where they could be received with a child who had autism or some other form of disability. So that's the starting place. I think the second thing is, again, there's maybe a lack of clear recognition about how the church has some responsibility to be there for people of need. Oftentimes the church can become a place where people who are all okay get together, people who are all affluent come together. And so particularly in many of the congregations that I'm familiar with. And I think there's a way in which we need to get past that, get beyond that and say, okay, where are we there for those whom Jesus was there for?
Thank you. Yes, Lisa, what do you think will be some of the challenges?
I think from a secular point of view, it's the feeling and that we're doing it okay, that we have IDEA, that we have ADA, that we have a Rehabilitation Act, and that we're doing it right. And I think that's a false sense of security in terms of working with populations who may have special needs. So I think that people may not realize that there are gaps that they need to fill.
Julie, what are your thoughts?
Mine always comes back to Christian schools, and so the session I'll be presenting at the Disability Summit will focus on how do we go about developing programs within our Christian schools. And based on my experience and my knowledge, there isn't a whole lot going on in the Central Valley when it comes to disability services within Christian schools. That's not to state that we don't have some programs in some schools, but the knowledge of that is very sparse and parents don't know about it. So how do we go about sparking that interest within our Christian schools? How can we embrace and empower the families or parents of children with disabilities who want their child going to school with their siblings in a Christian environment so that they can move their Christian schools to look down that avenue?
One of the things, as Quentin and Lisa were sharing concerning recognizing the need, I was able to reflect upon a trip to South Africa where in visiting the Apartheid Museum and how the disabled were being excluded when they were recreating themselves in a post-apartheid era. And there was a statistic that stated for every one person that was killed in apartheid, 3 others were disabled. And that is a huge oversight by many of us who overlooked the reality of, wow, look how many people were disabled as a result of this system. And even beyond oppressive systems in our world today, how do we care for those? So when we look at that, what are some practices or things that you are doing to help promote this, to help people to recognize the need of this summit? What is being done to engage the people? Julie.
I think for me and my passion areas, reaching out to the superintendents, the directors of education within some of our Christian organizations, including the diocese here in Fresno, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, the Association of Christian Schools International, and connecting with those people in positions who can spread the word and get the information out so that we can have school teachers in Christian schools come. In addition, as Lisa and I work in the special ed division, we're letting our students, our candidates, many of them who are already teaching in public schools, come to the summit so that although they cannot profess their faith within that public school environment, they can continue to grow and come to understand from the walk in their life in that public school how they can personify Christ's message for children with disabilities.
Okay, well, we're going to take a break now. We'll come back and hear from Quentin and Lisa. Thank you. We're going to take a break at this time.
KNXT thanks all its loyal viewers and respected businesses who have supported your Catholic television station. Now you can support KNXT with program underwriting by having your name, your company's name, or organization associated with your favorite program. Detailed information about you or your company will appear before and after each program or day part you select. Keep the quality and spiritual message alive and make a difference. Call 559-488-7440 today or go online at knxt.tv to find out more about program underwriting on KNXT.
Welcome back to the show. We are joined by 3 of my colleagues at Fresno Pacific University from special education, Julie Lane, Quentin Kinnison from Christian Ministry and Leadership, and Lisa Keith from special education, as we're talking about the Johnny and Friends Disability Summit. So we left off before the break talking about how do you promote this and how are you getting people there in light of the challenges that you may be facing. And Julie, you were sharing concerning the broad reach. Anything you wanted to clarify concerning that?
Just the associations that we're working with are very specific here to California. The Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, the Association of Christian Schools International, Evangelical Lutheran Churches of America. Those are all national, international organizations, but we're really targeting the market here in California that can be present.
Great. And Quentin, how are you promoting it?
Well, one of the things, again, going back to how Fresno Pacific has certain kinds of resources and Johnny and Friends has certain kind of resources, we've started with engaging on our own website, Fresno Pacific, announcing the summit and the opportunity to attend it. As students are coming back to classes on August 25th, we're announcing to the students the opportunity to attend the summit, also to receive credit for a one-unit course by attending and doing some additional coursework. And then, in addition to that, working with folks like Tom Sims of the Mid-Valley Southern Baptist Convention here locally, who has promoted the summit on a number of occasions, and others like that. So we're continuing to create some partnerships as well as use our resources as Johnny and Friends uses their resources to promote the summit.
Thank you. Lisa, from your perspective?
To a lesser degree, working with the local community, my students, those that I advise, working with local school districts that I have contact with, and then through the church organization that I belong to.
Great. And I noticed there were many mainstream denominational bodies in evangelical, but what about African-American, Latino churches, communities? How have they been engaged and invited in this process?
Well, again, using the resources of the university. I mean, we are sending out information to all the churches that are part of our constituency, and as Fresno Pacific is a Mennonite Brethren institution and Pacific District Conference, many of our growing churches in the denomination are Hispanic, Latino. We have African American churches, in addition to the other churches that are part of our circle of influence, and so we're trying to include them in that, as is Johnny and Friends.
Great.
Yeah.
Anybody else care to comment on that?
I think other than one avenue, I think that will come up next month, if not the 1st of October, for us to advertise through, is that Quentin and I are finishing up a book that's now in publication process to pinpoint how to go about developing programs within the Christian environment. And once that book is released, that we will do a marketing blast on that as well.
It's worth noting. Sorry, Karen. It's worth noting that one of the real draws to this conference for many people is the fact that Johnny Erickson Tata herself will be present at the conference, as will a number of well-known people in the ministry disability conversation, Jeff McNair and
Kathy Reynolds.
And as well as our own HPs. SPs here in the local context, and so we're also helping spread the word through those networks that's part of the conversation.
Yes.
Great. So when we think about Johnny and Friends as being a specifically Christian evangelical organization, and what will be some of the theological concepts, perceptions, and attitudes? Lisa, you sort of spoke to it a little bit earlier around Christian ethics and how it can align with the FPU idea and the various standards that teachers have to abide by. But what are some of the deeper theological themes that you're trying to engage, and how was those theological frameworks that helped shape this summit? Quentin, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I'll start with that. So in talking with I have the privilege of teaching a class in the special education program around theology of disability. And I always introduce that as a beginning of a conversation. We don't claim to have the final answer in these conversations. God is always the one with the final authority in there, and so we recognize we're in process. But in the start of that, we begin with something I think is common to most folk, whether they come from a Roman Catholic perspective, Orthodox, evangelical, Pentecostal, whether they're African American, Latino, or Euro American and such. So we start with the reality of the Trinity, right? How is God's own inner life then, and then His putting His image on us about how we connect with others, and recognize that our interconnection with others is a process that God is redeeming, so that people aren't excluded. Oftentimes, the most significant way in which people experience brokenness and sin in this world is through exclusion. And particularly folks who have disabilities that are particularly physical in nature and are obvious, or have perhaps mental disabilities or emotional disabilities that can become apparent in certain ways. The exclusion that they feel is something that God's kingdom work is in the process of redeeming them back as part of a society and a people. So we're talking about those kinds of themes. How do we include people as a reality of God's kingdom work?
And it continues to go on about that whole sense of community, and how do we shape community and change a culture so that all are accepted for who they are, not for who we want them to be.
Right.
And so it kind of goes along with that FPU idea, which I think Lisa touched on. previously about that development of community hospitality.
Yeah, so, and when you say community, you want to elaborate on community and hospitality, by whom, for whom, and
I think Quentin can expand on that as far as the church goes, but when I look at the school environment, I think of community as the community where that school is situated. You know, it's just not the people who go there. It's the community, the residences around that community. It's the parish. It's the church community. It's the board of directors. It's the pastors. It's the school administrators. It's the teachers. It's the parents, regardless if their child has a disability or not. It's the viewpoint of all. And I've always felt that if we could mold the minds of our young preschoolers, kindergarten, first grade, with the viewpoint of acceptance for who we are, that we could eventually change society, because it is where we need to start with children to do that.
I think it's interesting, just to build on that, that people are always talking about in classrooms, let's celebrate how we're different. I think we need to celebrate how we're alike. I think we have more things in common with each other, our base humanity and our who we are in Christ. That needs to be celebrated, that no matter what else we have that's different about each other, we have that in common, and that's what makes the difference.
And just kind of piggybacking on that idea, you know, the idea of created in the image of God, created for relationships with people, is the most common way in which we are connected. And so back to that idea, that is a theological concept that we all live out, even if we don't recognize we're living that out.
So, as a practical theologian, a category is theological anthropology, or the question is, what does it mean to be human?
Right.
It seems like that's what you're getting at the core at. Who are we as humans?
That's right.
And how do we live that out in our everyday lived experience as we interact in our need one for another? So that sounds like that's going to be a great disability summit. Share, you have sort of intimated to what you hope people will walk away with, but after going through this it's a 2-day event.
Friday night, Saturday.
Okay, Friday night, what's the?
6 to 8.
6 to 8.
That sounds
It's actually
right.
7 to 8:30.
Okay, so it's a Friday, Saturday structure, curriculum, Saturday from 8 to 4.
It's a little bit later, and I think we're starting about 8:30 and then going to about 3 o'clock.
Okay.
Right.
So we'll share about specifically within this 12-hour time frame, give or take. What 3 things do you hope people, regardless of what their background and experiences are, will walk away with from having participated, presented, and being present at this Disability Summit? Lisa, let's begin with you.
One thing I really want people who attend my talks to come away with is that relationship and restoration of that relationship is ultimately the most important thing, whether it's in the classroom, in the church, in the community, all the way around. I think that is the most important thing, that when my neighbor, my neighbor's child does well, I do well. And that's what I hope they take away from my talks.
Great. Quentin, what are your hopes?
My hopes are, particularly for congregations, that there'll be either a renewed sense of purpose around this process of finding ways to include others, or at least for those who this is a new construct or new conversation for, a beginning of a budding openness to it. So they can go back to their congregations and start having some really good conversations internally about what does it mean to be a place where we welcome people who are affected by disability, to care and to be cared for by them, so it's a truly inclusive conversation.
Right. And you, Julie?
I think that that wall of fear has at least some holes in it that they can begin to look through, that we don't have to do this in one huge giant leap, that it can be done in baby steps. But if we can start to tear the wall down or provide holes by which to start to look at things a little differently, or see that what has been done or could be done, and start to create a vision that will begin to move people forward.
Great. And so in light of moving people forward, in 30 seconds or less, are there any future events of collaboration with Johnny and Friends and FPU on the horizon?
On the horizon, we've got the Disability Summit. I know we've got the Rock and Roll coming up in September, which is a wonderful fundraising event that is being hosted by Fresno Pacific as well.
I'm not sure
They,
beyond that right now.
we're in conversations about what it would mean to do more work around offering academic kind of credits to folks, particularly in ministry, but also in other areas. And so thinking about some of the programs that are happening at other institutions, how Fresno Pacific might be a part of that. Those are pretty initial, but those are in conversations as well as partnerships. Yeah.
Is there anything specific that you hope to see with Johnny and Friends or others like organizations around disabilities as a Christian institution can be doing in the Central Valley and beyond? Lisa, you care to comment on that?
Well, one of the things that we've done in special education is partner with Move International, which is an organization that shares how to get individuals who may have physical disabilities up and moving. And so we want them moving, we want them being active in any way that they can so that their lives are enriched, and therefore they can enrich our lives as well.
You, Julie, any other partnerships?
Other than I just think we had forgot to share that Break the Barriers will be at the Disability Summit, and they will be performing on Saturday. And we're excited about having Break the Barriers with us. They're here in Fresno, and just the opportunity to see the abilities of even those with disabilities.
All right.
Just briefly mention the Anabaptist Disability Network is another organization that has done some good work around this conversation that we have been partnered with or engaged with in other ways. So,
Well, thank you for being on the show today. I think you've done an excellent job of articulating the Disability Summit. I'm glad it is in your hands, and I look forward to our community being able to benefit from it. Thank you for watching today's show. You can catch us on Thursdays at 8 p.m., Fridays at 1 p.m. on Channel 49 or on KNXT.TV online. Take care and God bless.